Discovered a cursed cabin in the woods. 7 Sinister rules my great-uncle exposed to survive. Sarah wiped the dust from the cabin's weather-beaten doorway, her heart heavy with the loss of her mother. The place where summer laughter and family reunions once thrived now lay cloaked in a shroud of silence, an eerie stillness that pressed down on her shoulders as she stepped inside. The air felt damp, filled with a palpable dread that clung to her skin. Memories, alive yet haunting, twisted in her mind. Overlapping scenes of her childhood mingled with the peeling wallpaper and decayed furniture. But as she closed the door behind her, a chilling realization gripped her: this cabin was not the same as she remembered. Dust motes danced in the waning sunlight, creating an unsettling spectacle, while a shiver prickled at the base of her spine. She felt that something was different. Shadows seemed to linger longer than they should, and the corners of the room felt watchful, hiding sinister secrets of the past. Just then, a creak echoed from the floorboards beneath her feet, a sound so deep it resonated in her bones. Struggling to find familiarity, Sarah kicked debris aside and discovered the loose floorboard. She pried it open, revealing a tattered journal. The shaky handwriting belonged to her great-uncle, filled with ramblings about the woods surrounding Clear Creek. It detailed 7 survival rules, a grim guide warning of unseen threats that lurked beyond the trees. A cold chill gripped her as she read, her heartbeat quickening. Each rule felt like a noose tightening around her throat. As the sun sank below the horizon, casting long, grotesque shadows across the cabin, paranoia began unraveling her thoughts. Strange cries echoed through the dense forest, sounding like a lament of lost souls. Sarah felt the weight of eyes upon her, a gnawing certainty she was not alone. She needed supplies. She couldn't face the night here, among the murmurs of her family's haunted history. She ventured into town, the streetlights flickering nervously. People greeted her with unnerving warmth, their smiles a little too wide. The sheriff, a man with a charming grin, dismissed her fears about the woods as nothing more than tales to scare children. Just the folklore of Clear Creek, he grinned, but his eyes held secrets, shadows that lingered longer than they should. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Returning to the cabin, the weight of the town's secrets pressed in on her. Each glance from shopkeepers sent icy tendrils curling around her heart. They were too curious, too attentive. Fragments of laughter echoed around her as shadows moved just beyond sight. Sarah's thoughts raced through her great-uncle's rules, terror tightening its grip. The woods held more than just memories, they cradled dark entities that had likely claimed lives. The stillness came next, a pregnant pause thick with dread. Then, suddenly, a knock sounded at the door, sharp and insistent, a heartbeat marching its way through the cabin's fragile walls. Panic surged within her, fear gripped her throat. What waited outside was unknown, a faceless force eager to breach her sanctuary. The door trembled under the pressure of the unseen, chilling her to the bone. With every heartbeat echoing in her ears, Sarah faced the ultimate question: to open the door, or to abide by the sinister rules that promised survival. Within the encroaching shadows, her past was entwined with an ominous fate, leaving her desperate to escape before it consumed her whole. The knock came again, louder this time, reverberating through the cabin as if it had its own pulse. Sarah's breath hitched. Cold sweat trickled down her spine, pooling at the small of her back. She pressed her ear against the door, straining to hear beyond the thumping, but it was drowned by a cacophony of rustling leaves and distant wails that echoed through the woods. What could it be? Her heart raced, pounding like a war drum. "Hello?" she called, her voice a trembling whisper. No response. Only silence, heavy and foreboding, pressed back against her question. The door felt like it was alive, a sentient barrier between her and the unknown. The rules stirred in her mind, twisting like vines around her thoughts. Never open the door after dark, one of them warned. What comes after you may not be what it seems. She wanted to retreat from the door, to bury herself beneath the layers of dust and dread that coated the cabin's floor. But instinct tugged at her. Maybe it was someone who needed help, or maybe it was a trap. Another knock, this time accompanied by a voice that cracked like ice on a winter's morning. "Sarah? It's me, please let me in." She froze. The voice, it felt familiar. But her brain struggled to place it with the right memory. Was it a friend? A survivor of this hellish place? Panic morphed into a wild swirl of hope and dread. Could it be her mother, returned from the dead to guide her out of this nightmare? "Who are you?" she shouted back, trying to gauge the truth wrapped in that voice. "It's me, Sarah. I swear. You need to let me in before it's too late. I know what's in the woods." Fear and curiosity wrestled within her, an internal chaos that threatened to explode. Her hand hovered hesitantly over the doorknob, shaking. What if it was a trick? What if that voice belonged to something worse than the woods? "Stay away. Just tell me what you know." She shouted again, her voice more desperate than brave. A growl in the distance made her freeze. Deep, low, and malevolent. It clawed at her insides, a visceral warning of imminent danger. Her instincts kicked in, urging her to heed her great-uncle's words. "Abide by the rules." One of them, the voice whispered, almost too soft to hear. "One of them is coming for you." A chill coursed through her. She stumbled backward, eyes darting to the windows. The woods seemed darker than before, shadows creeping closer. Shapes lurked between the trees, their forms blurred and indistinct, as if they were held together by the very darkness they inhabited. "Sarah," the voice cracked, urgency laced with fear. "You have to open the door. It knows you're here." Pain shot through her, sharp as glass, knitting her gut into knots as the growl drew nearer. The door trembled once more, and in that moment, Sarah made a decision, though a part of her screamed to run. She turned the knob. As the door swung open, darkness invaded, and the air thickened with an unbearable weight. The face that emerged from the shadows wasn't what she expected, a wretched parody of familiarity that sent a chill racing through her. "Sarah," it crooned, an eerily soothing tone that set her on edge. You let me in that instant, she knew. She understood how easily the rules could bend, how swiftly fear could turn into despair. What came next would change everything. The woods were alive with a new threat, creeping closer, waiting for her next move. The hunt was on, but who was being hunted? And as her heart raced with terrifying realization, a chilling question unfolded in her mind: did she just open Pandora's box? The moment the door swung wide, Sarah was engulfed in a dense darkness. Her body instinctively recoiled, heart pounding as if it wanted to escape her chest. The figure that stood before her twisted the very essence of memory into a grotesque image, its features molded by shadows that moved as if alive. "Mom?" she whispered, hope and horror twisting together in her throat. It smiled, but that smile was wrong. It felt like a death mask, devoid of warmth. "You don't remember. I've come for you, dear. You must listen." The growl from the woods erupted again, closer now, a fierce predator that had picked up its prey's scent. Breath caught in her lungs. "What do you want?" She backed away, instinctively moving toward the safety of the darkness behind her. "It's not I want. It's you that needs me." The voice dripped with sugary deceit, drawing Sarah in with a sickening familiarity. "You opened the door. You have to trust me now." Trust? How could she trust something that wore her mother's face? Adrenaline surged as she felt the air shift, a pressure building like the thunder before a storm. "Please. You have to remember the rules." It reached out, fingers stretching towards her, but the shadows began to pulse with a life of their own, flickering around the figure like hungry flames. Outside, the rustling grew louder, branches cracking under weight. The darkness seemed alive, surrounding the cabin, pushing against the walls as if intent on forcing its way inside. No, no. She turned to flee, but the shadows enveloped her, clawing at her consciousness, memories trickling like sand through her fingers. Stay back. She screamed, pushing against the palpable dark. Sarah, don't. It's coming. The voice chased after her, panic sharpened to a knife's edge. She stumbled backward, adrenaline coursing hot through her veins. The creature was right behind her, cold and relentless. The door swung away, revealing the terror outside. Dark shapes loomed, swaying with intent, eyes glinting with hunger. In one wild moment, terror overwhelmed her senses, pushing her into a spiral. She tore herself away from the door, heart racing, desperate to escape the familiar monster. The figure lunged, its arms extending like shadows themselves, trying to grab her, to pull her back into the grip of the cabin. Forget the rules. The thing shrieked. You need me to survive. But Sarah had learned that night, rules shape reality. She recalled snippets of her great-uncle's warnings, echoing through her mind. She had to break the rules. She had to fight. With a burst of wild courage, she dove away from the door, rolling across the dusty floor. She reached for the nearest window and yanked it open, splintered wood scraping against her palms. She felt the oily breath of the darkness pull back momentarily as she slipped through. The cool night air almost felt like freedom, invigorating in its crispness. Without looking back, she sprinted into the woods, panic igniting her legs. The entities around the cabin stirred violently, their growls merging into a monstrous chorus, rage igniting the night air. She ran, branches clawing at her clothes, roots threatening to trip her as she plunged deeper into the woods. The haunting whispers of the familiar creature faded, replaced by those sinister growls, as if the landscape itself had betrayed her. Sarah. The voice echoed through the trees, blending into the night. You cannot escape who you truly are. Terror thrummed through her. What did it mean? Did they really know her? But just as doubt began to creep in, a glimmer caught her eye. A flickering light, flickering like hope. Was it real, or just another deception? As the shadows danced predatorily behind her, she sprinted toward the illumination. Every heartbeat thundered in her ears, a countdown to an unknown doom. And as hunger clawed at her from the woods, she reached forward, knowing she had to find out what lay beyond. But was it safety or just another trap? The light beckoned, glowing brighter, yet everything whispered that it could lead to her ultimate demise. What awaited her now? The flickering light danced ahead, teasing Sarah with promises of sanctuary as she sprinted through the underbrush. Her lungs burned, and her heart pounded like a drum, each beat piercing the oppressive silence that wrapped around her. But behind her, the growls intensified, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming a chilling tapestry of dread that clung to her skin. Keep running, Sarah. She urged herself, bursting through a thicket of brambles. The light pulsed with a strange glow now, illuminating fragments of the forest in threads of silver. Just ahead, she could make out a clearing and open space promising some semblance of safety. Yet, doubt gnawed at her. Was it really safe? What if it was a trap? Every instinct screamed to turn back, but she pressed on, fear fueling her flight. The growls morphed into a blood-curdling howl, and she forced herself to ignore it, pushing through the prickling brush, her fingers brushing against cool, wet bark as she fought for each step. As she plunged into the clearing, her breath hitched. Before her stood an ancient tree gnarled and twisted, its roots snaking across the ground like the fingers of the desperate dead. And there, at its base, flickered the light. A lantern swayed, its flame steady despite the wind that seemed to whisper around her. Foolish girl, a voice hissed from the darkness behind her. You won't escape the rules. A cold chill wrapped around her heart. With a swift motion, she turned to face the darkness, but it was gone. Just shadows and rustling leaves. Enough games. She shouted into the void. The silence, however, remained steadfast. Panic clawed at her throat, bubbling to the surface like bile. She stepped toward the lantern, drawn by the warmth it radiated. But as she approached, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, outlined against the light, its features indistinct and terrifying. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice quivering as dread crept back in. The figure leaned closer, the light licking at its form like flames. "You don't remember me either, do you?" it said with a voice that sent her back to the very depths of her childhood nightmares. "I've always been with you, watching, waiting. Stay away from me." A flicker of defiance propelled her further toward the spectral light. "Sarah," it whispered, "we're bound by blood. You cannot avoid your fate. You'll have to choose soon." Her mind raced, a fragmented puzzle of memories threatening to overwhelm her. The warning of her great-uncle echoed in her ears, "The rules, Sarah. They define your survival." But what were the rules? Desperation surged, she had to remember. Turning back to the lantern, she grasped it with trembling hands, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. Perhaps it was her only chance the light could protect her. Then came a deafening roar, and the shadows rippled like waves, converging toward her with a singular intent. They clawed at her, seeking entry to her mind, her soul. She felt those cold shadows wrap around her ankles, dragging her down toward a dark oblivion. Without thinking, she swung the lantern at the encroaching darkness. It collided with a shadow, emitting a blinding burst of light. The figure momentarily recoiled, allowing her a moment to break free. "Remember, Sarah." The voice screeched as she sprinted across the clearing. "You'll have to choose." She ran, the trees tightening around her, narrowing the path, as questions flooded her mind. What choice? What rules? And high above, the moon illuminated the chaos, casting her silhouette against the world she was trying to escape. What would the rules demand of her now? Branches slashed at her skin like angry whips as Sarah barreled through the tree-lined maze, her thoughts spinning in disarray. The darkness felt alive, pulsating, reaching, eager to clutch her with clammy fingers. Each labored breath tasted of fear and desperation. The growls behind her continued monstrous, relentless, as if a pack was on her tail, hungry and bloodthirsty. The glow from the lantern in her hand flickered weakly, but it was all she had. She forced herself to hold on to it, a fragile hope against the encroaching shadows. Beating heart, trembling hands, her body was a mess of adrenaline as she plunged forward, the wind howling a chilling reminder that she was not safe yet. Through the confusion, she recalled snippets of her uncle's warnings, the stories told over late-night fires. "The rules protect us, Sarah," he had said. "Without them, darkness will find you and swallow you whole." But what were those rules? She racked her brain, searching for the wisdom locked behind her confusion. Her footsteps slowed, instinct prompting her to scan her surroundings. The trees here stood unervingly quiet, their branches curling like pale fingers against the moonlight. Ahead, the tree line thinned, leading to a clearing that felt electric with tension. She approached cautiously, focus trained on the faint outline of a structure wood-worn to splinters and covered in thick vines, the grotesque remnants of a cabin. The door hung ajar, as if inviting her into its gaping mouth. With an unsettling twist in her gut, she stepped closer. Had her great-uncle ever mentioned a cabin? The memories eluded her, twisted with uncertainty, like fog rolling through her mind. She peered inside, the lantern-esque glow casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Sarah," came a breathy whisper from deep within the cabin, and she felt the chill creep back into her veins. It was so familiar, that whisper. An icy shiver danced down her spine. With each step inside, the atmosphere grew heavier, the scent of decay and despair wrapping around her. Scraps of old newspaper littered the floor, yellowed and brittle, detailing disappearances, strange happenings, and the ominous consequences of breaking the rules. She crouched down to read. "Those who sever the ties will never return." The words made her stomach churn. What ties? Was it blood? Family? A light flickered in the far corner, the frail glow revealing a rusty old mirror. She moved toward it, compelled by something deeper than fear. The reflection stared back at her, but something felt off. It was twisted, shadowed, an echo of who she was. "Choose, Sarah." The voice echoed, reverberating through her skull. "You can't hide from your blood." Gripped with confusion, her mind raced. The fragmented puzzles began colliding, breathless images of her great-uncle forming. He had spoken of sacrifices, of choices made in blood. The energy in the cabin thickened, shadows swirling around her, clinging to her legs like chains. Was this the choice? "Please," she whispered, clutching the lantern tightly. "What do you want from me?" In the depths of her reflection, a figure emerged, its face shrouded in darkness but those eyes piercing, familiar. Fear clawed through her once more. The whispers became frenzied fragments of sentences, incoherent yet urgent. "Blood must be paid." The rules demand. Suddenly, everything fell silent. The oppressive air stilled, suffocating. A weight bore down on her like a lead blanket, forcing her to her knees. Frantically, Sarah searched for her uncle's voice, her heartbeat thrumming in her ears. "What are the rules?" she cried out into the stillness. "What must I do?" The moment hung heavy before her, heartbeat echoing ominously in the stagnant air. And then, a whisper crept back, chilling to her core. "To survive you must give." She felt the searing grip of realization, the heavy truth looming larger than the darkness surrounding her. What price would she have to pay? Sarah's heart thundered. A cold sweat dampened her brow as her eyes darted around the cabin, panic clawing at her throat. The air hung thick with the weight of unsaid horrors, the very walls shivering with secrets that screamed to be released. She couldn't shake off the sense that the cabin itself was alive, hungry for her to make a choice, to fulfill some ghastly demand. "What must I give?" she whispered into the silence, her voice quaking, a feeble plea against the consuming darkness. The mirror in front of her shimmered, distorting her image, twisting it into a creature that seemed almost sentient. She leaned closer, her breath hitching as she recognized the shadow within it, a version of herself, but sallow, with hollow eyes that bore into her soul. "Your ties, blood life." It was a chorus of whispers, many voices threading through the stillness, taunting yet pleading. Sarah stumbled back, the lantern flickering violently, casting frantic shadows that danced upon the rotting walls. Every fading creak of the timber resonated with her own rising terror, like a heartbeat echoing in unison with her own. She could hear the growls again, not merely behind her but within the very bones of the cabin, as if the structure itself was warning her to flee. The papers scattered on the floor seemed to rattle, shaking with an energy all their own. Those who sever the ties. What did it mean? Her mind raced, images of family gatherings flashed, laughter, warmth, a tangible bond. And yet she felt the dark thread of inevitability pulling her back, guiding her toward the truth she feared. "Sarah," the whisper came again, closer, more intimate this time. The familiar voice washed over her like a shroud. It was her mother. Memories surged forward, snapshots of her childhood. "Stay close to the rules, my daughter," she could hear her gentle tone. "They will protect you." But this darkness was different. It was deeper, more insidious. The rules had become chains that now bound her to some ancient, twisted fate. Without thinking, she flipped the newspaper clippings over, searching for anything that could help. As her fingers brushed across the brittle paper, she froze. There, in the corner of one faded article, was a picture, a family portrait, faces she recognized instantly. There was her mother, radiant and smiling, arms wrapped around a young girl. Beside them, her great-uncle stood tall, but his expression was dark, eyes half closed, shadows pooling around him. Sever the ties, it was the punchline of a sick joke, the secret that led too many families into unimaginable despair. Choose. Give. The voices grew louder, a cacophony that pierced through her mind, consuming her thoughts. It felt like a storm was brewing all around, and she was caught in its eye. Desperation gnawed at her insides, she had to act. Suddenly, she remembered a story, one her mother told, the final choice made to keep the darkness at bay. The sound of growling swelled once more, urging her to confront her fears. The shadows in the cabin shifted, whispering promises and threats in the same breath. With trembling hands, she raised her lantern high, illuminating the mirror once more. "I want to do it," she shouted defiantly, but doubt crept into her heart. Could she really escape? Before she could debate further, the shadows surged, spilling from the corners like ink bleeding into water, drenching the room in blackness. She felt a surge of energy, as if the very darkness were alive, hungry. None escape without a cost. The shadows began to close in around her, liquid tendrils wrapping around her legs. The whispers, once soft, morphed into a raucous choir, drowning her will. She fought against them, heart racing, but the darkness only tightened its grip. "What price?" she screamed, voice cracking with fear. In the chaos, a single thought broke through: the price would always be something deep, something irrevocable. Then, with a shattering crack, the mirror burst, sending shards flying like vicious dew into the air. And in that moment, just as the darkness lunged at her, she caught sight of something glinting among the remnants. A key. What did it unlock? Would it lead to her salvation or her doom? The growling crescendoed, and she stood at a crossroads. Would she grab the key and flee, or would she face the shadows? And then, as she reached out, a voice spoke behind her: "The key belongs to the one who dares to confront the truth you hide." Everything went still, and dread pooled in her stomach. What truth? What would it cost her to find out? With a shuddering breath, Sarah grasped the key, its cool metal shocking against her palm. It felt significant, like a lifeline tossed into a churning sea. The whispers quieted momentarily, an eerie stillness enveloping the air, leaving her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. "What truth?" she demanded, her voice breaking through the silence, desperate for an answer. The shadows twitched, as if deliberating, but the growls grew impatient, a sinister promise lurking just beneath the surface. The key shimmered under the lantern light, beckoning her to act. "What do you unlock?" she whispered, glancing around the ruined cabin as if it harbored the answers. The walls felt closer now, as if the cabin was leaning in, eager to hear her choice, eager to ensnare her. A low snarl erupted from behind, splintering her focus. Struggling to quell her fear, she turned swiftly, shining the lantern into the dark crevices. There. Shapes shifted, writhing shadows that undulated and twisted, grateful for the night's devotion to them. They clawed at the edges, reaching for her warmth like cold hands closing in on her. "Your past, your future, they are one," the disembodied voice whispered again, and this time it felt more pronounced, vibrating through the floorboards under her feet. There was an urgency. Sever the ties. She hesitated. Did she dare confront the truths of her family? Whispered warnings echoed through her mind, memories of her childhood, the rules her mother made her memorize, the old family secrets that had long been left unsaid. Her pulse surged, she could feel the weight of each decision pressing down upon her: escape this nightmare, or plunge deeper into the darkness that gripped her family. But what did she truly fear? The shadows or the revelations? With resolve intertwined with dread, Sarah took a step forward, grabbing the lantern with both hands. "No. I want to be a prisoner to my family's past," she shouted defiantly, feeling the words shatter the heavy silence like glass. The shadows recoiled, retreating slightly, taken aback by her outburst. "Every choice has a consequence," the voice droned, indifferent to her courage. She turned to the mirror's slivered remnants, her eyes drawn to the jagged edges. Each shard reflected an aspect of her fears, regrets, and losses. And behind it, the scenery warped, pulling her mind back into memories she had wanted to bury. One last flicker of the lantern, and she could almost see her great-uncle's darkened face framed by laughter, those eyes holding secrets that had long since soured. What if they are true? She murmured, a revelation blooming in her mind. What if the cost is more than I can bear? A chill cascaded through her, as a sudden blast of cold air whipped around her, carrying whispers that clawed at her sanity. You are bound by blood and choice. You cannot evade. You are not alone in this. Enough. She screamed, pressing the lantern forward, desperate to ward off this feeling of doom. She had to find the door, to leave this cursed place. But the key almost felt like a burden in her hand, weighing her down with every irrational thought. Suddenly, she heard a crash from below, a thunderous sound that rattled the very foundation of the cabin. Shadows converged, their shapes undulating dangerously, inching closer, drawn by the intensity of her fear. The familiar growl morphed into a feral howl that shook the cabin unlike anything before, resonating in her bones. What do you want from me? She cried out, feeling the walls pulse with malevolence, echoing her panic. But instead of answering, the shadows writhed, slithering closer as the temperature plummeted. She could almost feel them breathing down her neck, sending prickles of dread cascading down her spine. The glint of the key captured her attention once more. Could this unlock the secrets of her family? Could it be the only way to break this murderous cycle? With a heart hammering in her chest, she spun to find the source of the sound that had fractured her focus, just as a dark form loomed behind her. Will you face what you fear, Sarah? Or will you succumb to the darkness that calls? The darkness pressed in tighter, an unyielding force that made her skin crawl. And in that moment of hesitation, everything hung in the balance, a harrowing choice between facing an unspeakable truth or giving in to the insatiable shadows that craved her whole. Just as the air pulsed with unseen energy, Sarah realized she had to decide. What was the truth hiding within the darkness? What would she risk to find out? And then, with a shock that blasted through the cabin like thunder, she saw it. The keyhole revealed itself just above the hearth, glinting in a flash of fleeting light. Was this the answer, or another trap? She stood poised, not knowing that her next step would change everything forever. The pulse of the keyhole drew her in, a siren call that drowned out the chaos of clawing shadows. Sarah's breath came fast, fear and determination clashing within her like thunder. She raised the key, fingers trembling as she realized the enormity of what she was about to do. The shadows groaned, swirling around in a malevolent dance, eager for her surrender. Is this the way out? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, yet her heart thundered as if trying to answer for her. She hesitated, staring into the abyss of darkness that loomed around her. A flash of light flickered from the lantern, illuminating faces twisted, angry, desperate. They were the echoes of those who had walked this path before her, and she could almost hear their muffled screams blending with the angry growls of the encroaching shadows. Sever the ties. The voice still rang in her ears, insisting on a clarity that gripped her soul. Was unlocking this door the severance she needed? Or would it chain her to the past? Focusing her resolve, she pushed through the confusion, stepping toward the fireplace. The key slipped into the keyhole with unexpected ease, locking into place like it was always meant to be. A deep breath filled her lungs, and she twisted the key. The action sent a vibration through the air, sending a shockwave that rippled outward. For an instant, silence enveloped her, taut like a drawn bowstring, and then, a deep grinding noise erupted from the hearth. The shadows recoiled as the darkness writhed in pain, twisting up against the walls. The light of the lantern flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows on the walls that appeared to stretch and shrivel, as if trying to evade the very existence of her actions. Sarah's pulse raced. Had the act of opening this figurative door scared them off, or was she merely unleashing something worse? A sudden gust of frigid air swirled around her, nearly blowing the lantern from her grasp. No! She gasped, tightening her grip. She felt cold fingers dragging through her hair and brushing against her neck. Get back! She shouted, feeling their chilling breath on her skin. The key turned fully, an echo that resonated like a gunshot in the stillness. The hearth exploded with light, revealing a passage, dark and foreboding, beneath the old floorboards. A smell of rust and decay wafted up, intoxicating and terrible. An ancient presence beckoned her to descend, a voice stirring in her mind that was both familiar and terrifying. "Enter, Sarah," the whispers urged, coaxing her forward. "Know the truth of your lineage." She steadied herself, uncertainty laced with a fierce instinct for survival, tempered by the gnawing fear in her gut. Swallowing hard, she began to step towards the opening. But as she did, she felt a tug at her ankle, cold, like ice, pulling her down. She stumbled, nearly losing her balance. Shadows surged, clawing at her heels like ravenous dogs. "Please!" she cried, pulling herself free. She could sense their frustration, their hunger mounting. She was the last flicker of light in their endless night. The whispers turned chaotic, mixing with anguished cries that echoed through the passageway. Sarah could feel a dark hunger watching from the depths, waiting for her slip. With a surge of raw courage, she leaped over the gaping maw of darkness, just as the shadows lunged toward her. Landing precariously in the passage, she turned around, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Would pushing this door open usher her into salvation or summoning the very heart of her family's curse? And just then, she heard it, a thundering roar from below, shaking the walls around her. "You locked the darkness out, but it hungers for you," the voice echoed, taunting and sinister. "What will you choose now?" Sarah's breath caught. Somewhere deep within, she knew the answer would unravel everything. Yet all around her, shadows prowled, dark and unyielding, closing in as she teetered on the edge of revelation and despair. Would she descend into the depths to face her family's dreadful legacy, or escape while she still had a chance? The choice loomed large, a maddening spiral of fate. And as the echoes of the past reverberated into the present, a wrestling sound emerged from the darkness beneath her, a familiar voice, twisted and unfamiliar, whispering her name. The walls around Sarah throbbed with a heartbeat of their own, pulsing ominously in rhythm with the creeping shadows engulfing her. She took a step back, glancing toward the light behind her. The lantern flickered, a feeble flame against the encroaching darkness. Time hung heavily, the air thick with dread. The wrestling sound from below grew louder, more urgent, urging her to decide. Sarah, it was a voice from the past, familiar yet alien. The whisper crawled on her skin like an insect, unsettling. Was it a warning? Or a lure? Her heart thundered in her chest, drowning out the chaos. With the shadows creeping ever closer, she turned away from the glowing hearth and peered into the abyss that gaped beneath her. The passage beckoned, hidden and threatening. Mustering her courage, she felt an invisible force dare her to step forward. "Face it, Sarah. You have to know the truth," murmured the voice again, dripping with dark promises. The moment felt heavy with the weight of generations, as if a buried history clawed to escape. Trembling, she lowered herself to the crumbling stairs that spiraled downward, the wood groaning beneath her weight. Each creak echoed in the silence, twisting into a dissonant symphony that set her teeth on edge. The air grew colder, icy tendrils swept around her ankles, paralyzing and angry. Shadows writhed against the walls of the narrow passage, twisting into dreadful shapes that contorted with every flicker of her lantern. Suddenly, a hiss sizzled in the air, a whispering warning that caused her to halt. "Turn back," it pleaded, sharper now. "You don't want to know." But the voice only served to fuel her desperation, her curiosity intertwining with dread. What horrors lay waiting in the sepulchral silence? As she descended, cold fingers brushed against her knees, jolting her into alertness. She spun around, light flaring as she swung the lantern. Shadows scrambled back, retreating but not vanishing. They loomed, mounting with malicious glee. "Do you feel that?" One shadow hissed, its voice curling around her like smoke. "The ties that bind you to us, you can't sever what you don't understand." Panic surged. The whispers crescendoed, weaving around her thoughts, planting seeds of doubt. What if this curse was not merely her heritage, but a dangerous inheritance, thriving on her light? No, she rocked back on her heels, nearly slipping on the rotted stairs. The shadows lunged slightly, pushing their advantage, clawing closer. I have to know. She screamed against the cacophony. The lantern flickered violently, sending shadows ricocheting into grotesque perspectives, faces contorted in rage and sorrow. Pressing forward, Sarah could almost taste the cold despair rising from the depths, inviting her to claim her legacy. With every hesitant step, her past unraveled before her eyes like a dark tapestry woven with pain and secrets. Suddenly, she stumbled into an opening, an underground chamber, vast and suffocating. The lantern's light revealed walls coated in thick layers of grime, storied whispers etched on the surfaces like ancient hieroglyphs. They screamed her family's history, a trail of suffering begging to be uncovered. A chill slithered through the air. The darkness, now tangible and alive, swirled in response, as if agitated by her presence. The shadowy forms danced with anticipation. Join us, Sarah. Embrace your truth. They urged, a frenzied chorus that sent electric terror racing down her spine. Heart racing, Sarah stepped further in. There, amid the decay, sat an old chest inlaid with symbols, pulsing faintly beneath the dust. Something deep within her stirred, an unsettling recognition. Was this the key? Only when her hand brushed the surface did she hear it, a single voice breaking from the cacophony, quieter but clear. Don't open it, it warned, slicing through the chaos like a dagger. What lay beyond? Would she unveil the truth or unleash untold horrors? And as Sarah hesitated, the shadows writhed closer, hungry for the answers she held. Time was slipping away, and sometimes, ignorance was truly bliss. Would she dare to unravel the knot of fate? With a deep breath, she reached for the latch. As Sarah's fingers brushed the latch of the chest, a jolt of energy surged through her, like static electricity igniting every nerve in her body. Doubt wrestled with determination, emotions swirling violently in her chest. This was at the moment that could either free her from the shackles of her family's past or bind her to it forever. Don't. The voice echoed, pleading. But maybe it was too late for listening. She was here, and she was going to find out the truth, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, she yanked the latch open. The lid creaked loudly, revealing a haunting glow that spilled forth, illuminating the darkness like an explosion of sorrowful stars. Inside lay letters, photographs, and a collection of fragile objects, each one a piece of her family's legacy. A broken locket glimmered in the light, and an overwhelming sorrow washed over her. This was her connection to them, the ties they could never sever. As she sifted through the artifacts, memories crashed over her like wild waves, laughter echoing around summer campfires, bedtime stories filled with magic and moral lessons, lessons her mother and great-uncle had taught her, intertwined with warnings that now felt like layers of thick fog shrouding her memory. The whispers crescendoed, wrapping around her like dark tendrils as shadows pressed in with urgency. Embrace us! They screamed. They wanted to pull her into the abyss of despair, to drown her in the legacy of lost lives, but behind the cacophony, something became starkly clear. I will not be a prisoner. Sarah shouted, shaking off their despair. The key in her hand pulsed, guiding her through this maelstrom of emotion, almost urging her to seek out a deeper understanding. What is this? She cried out into the chaos surrounding her, demanding answers. She held up the locket, the weight of her family's choices pressing heavily on her heart. A haunting sensation filled the chamber, and for a moment, the voices became quiet. The shadows recoiled, palpable fear etching itself onto their roiling forms. Only you can choose, Sarah, a voice called, now steady and strong. It was a voice she recognized, one of love that had echoed through her memories, belonging to her mother. Break the cycle. Breath hitching in her throat, Sarah turned the locket in her hands, identifying the faces trapped within the metal. There was her mother, young and hopeful, and beside her, the eyes of her great-uncle full of warning, sorrow, and pain. Had he carried the burden of their family's darkness all along? The chest pulsed with memories, tugging at the threads of her being, pulling her deeper into the truth. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, cries of rage erupting, desperate to reclaim her. "You have no escape. We are your past." They roared, chaos threatening to overwhelm her once more. No. Her declaration rang out forcefully. The weight of the past tried to smother her, but she squeezed the locket tightly, letting its warmth seep into her palm. She would defy the legacy of fear. Turning resolutely, she faced the darkness. "I choose to remember," she shouted, her voice piercing through the turmoil, anchoring her feet to the ground as she felt herself light up with resolve. The lantern glowed fiercely, its light expanding, pushing the shadows back, illuminating the truth buried within her family's past. Each layer of memory unfurled, revealing the roots of the curses, the sacrifices made out of love and desperation, and she saw an opportunity for healing. "I will face my truth," Sarah finally cried, determination igniting within her. She would harvest strength from her ancestors' pain instead of falling prey to it. The shadows scrambled, their furious cries fading as the light grew brighter, the clawing darkness finally beginning to retreat from the chamber. Sarah stepped forward, feeling the warmth enveloping her, breaking the hold the shadows had as they melted away in the newfound light. With her last drain of energy, she opened her eyes to find the shadows dissolving into the ether, a layer of peace settling in the room where despair had once reigned. The whispers became whispers of hope, stories to be shared rather than burdens carried alone. She had shed the weight of secrecy, like chains binding her, and now felt the flow of her family's legacy transform into something viable, a promise to carry their memories forward with love and understanding. As she stood, lantern in hand, she knew she had changed forever. The connection to the past would not be severed, but embraced, transforming into a source of strength. The door to the cabin creaked at the top of the staircase, and sunlight spilled over the threshold, bright and warm. Sarah stepped forward, breathing in the fragrant air of freedom. The world outside, the sun, the trees, the very ground seemed new and vibrant. As she traversed into the daylight, she was no longer running from her heritage. She was stepping into a new beginning, ready to shape her future on her terms. The chains of the past may have been heavy, but with them came the wisdom of generations. She would carry those lessons as she ventured into the world, no longer a flicker in the shadows. And as she left the cabin behind, the woods stood silent, as if in acknowledgement. "Goodbye," she whispered, knowing she carried her history with her, intertwined in a dance of light and shadow, an indelible part of who she was. Thank you for joining us on this wild journey. If you want more gripping tales, now is the moment to subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to help us conquer the algorithm and reach more curious minds. I need to hear from you, so flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. So make your voice heard, and let's keep this adventure alive.